I wasn't supposed to be home yet, but I saw her car outside. What I heard him whisper next shattered everything I thought I knew. Pause, beat, and that was only the beginning. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe if you believe the truth always comes out, and comment below. What would you have done if you were in my place? Because what I discovered that night changed my life forever. I wasn't supposed to be home yet. That's the part that keeps replaying in my mind, the way the entire night hinged on a single, ordinary change of plans. A meeting ended early. A coworker offered me a ride so I wouldn't have to wait for mine. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious, just life moving slightly off schedule. And that tiny shift is what exposed everything. That as I turned onto our street, my phone buzzed with a text from him. Running late, don't wait up. I remember smirking to myself, thinking how ironic it was that I was about to surprise him for once. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5, we had routines, predictability, and a shared understanding that nothing truly shocking happened in our lives anymore. Or so I thought. That's when I saw the car. It was parked 2 houses down, partially hidden by the oak tree that always dropped leaves onto the curb. At first, I didn't recognize it. My brain didn't want to. It's funny how the mind protects you before your heart catches up. But then I saw the dent near the back bumper and the vanity plate. My chest tightened instantly. I slowed my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. That car didn't belong on our street. It belonged to her. I hadn't seen her in months, but I didn't need a second look. Some faces and cars burn themselves into your memory, whether you want them to or not. I parked further down the block instead of pulling into our driveway. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure someone could hear it. I sat there for a full minute, staring at the dashboard, my thoughts racing. No, there's an explanation. There has to be. She was his coworker. Former coworker, technically. He'd sworn there was nothing between them. I'd asked more than once. Each time, he'd laughed it off, kissed my forehead, called me paranoid. Don't be ridiculous, he'd said. She's just someone I used to work with. You're the only woman I come home to. Yet here I was, home early, and her car was parked like it belonged there. I stepped out of my car quietly, closing the door with more care than I ever had before. The night air felt heavier than usual, pressing against my skin as I walked toward the house. Every step felt slow, deliberate, like my body knew something my heart was still refusing to accept. The lights were on inside, not all of them, just the ones he usually left on when he was trying to make the house feel warm, inviting, normal. I reached the front door and paused, my hand hovering over the handle. That's when I heard voices. Low, intimate, familiar. His voice was softer than I'd heard it in months. I didn't walk in right away. I don't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe fear, maybe the last piece of denial, trying to protect me. Instead, I moved toward the hallway window that faced the living room. The curtains were half drawn, just enough to let light spill onto the lawn. I stayed in the shadows, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might break free from my chest. I could see them. She was sitting on our couch, my couch, the one we picked out together during a Memorial Day sale, arguing about fabric and color like it mattered, the one I'd curled up on during movie nights and sick days and lazy Sundays. She sat there like she belonged. Her legs were crossed casually, her shoes were kicked off near the coffee table. She was laughing soft, breathy, familiar, and he was standing close to her, too close. His hand rested on the back of the couch, his body angled toward hers in a way I knew all too well. It was the way he stood when he was fully engaged, when he wanted someone's attention, when he cared. I felt sick. I leaned closer to the window, my breath shallow, my pulse roaring in my ears. I wanted to burst through the door, to scream, to demand answers. But then I heard it. His voice dropped even lower, barely above a whisper, but the house carried sound the way it always had. You're so tight. The words hit me like a physical blow, not because of what they implied, but because of how easily they came out of his mouth, like they were familiar, practiced. Like this wasn't the first time he'd said them. My stomach twisted violently. I had to press a hand against the wall to steady myself. She laughed again, a soft, pleased sound. Stop, she whispered back, but her tone didn't match the word. He leaned in closer. I couldn't hear everything they said after that. The blood rushing through my ears drowned out most of it. My vision blurred at the edges. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an explanation waiting to happen. This was betraying, filtered and undeniable. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, watching my life collapse through a pane of glass. Seconds felt like minutes. Minutes felt like hours. Every memory I had with him started replaying all at once: our wedding day, the vows, the promises, the nights he held me when I cried, the times he swore he'd never hurt me, and now here he was, whispering words he'd once reserved for me, to someone else, in our home. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, irreversible break. I stepped back from the window, my legs trembling. I knew if I stayed another second, I would either scream or shatter completely. Neither option would give me the clarity I suddenly needed. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I left. I walked back to my car, every step heavier than the last. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. I sat inside, staring straight ahead, tears finally spilling down my face. But even as my heart broke, another feeling began to surface beneath the pain. Resolve, because in that moment, I realized something important. He thought he was being careful. He thought he was in control. He thought I would never know. And he was wrong. Very, very wrong. I didn't drive far. That's the strange part. You'd think I would have sped off, screamed, cried, until my voice gave out, but instead, I parked a few blocks away, under a flickering streetlight that hummed softly like it was sharing my secret. I turned off the engine and sat there in the dark, my forehead resting against the steering wheel. Breathe in, breathe out. My chest hurt in a way I didn't know was possible. Not sharp, not sudden, just deep and aching, like something essential had been torn loose. I checked the time, 9:42 p.m. He had told me he'd be running late. That lie now echoed in my head, repeating itself with cruel clarity. I wiped my face and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, my expression unrecognizable. I looked like someone who'd just witnessed a death. In a way, I had. The version of my marriage I believed in had died on that couch. My phone buzzed again. Him meeting went long. Probably won't be home until after 10. I almost laughed. Instead, I took a screenshot. I didn't know why at the time, only that something inside me told me to start collecting moments, evidence, proof. Not for court, not yet, for myself, because I already knew what was coming. Next. Gaslighting. Denial. Blame. I had watched enough friends go through it, heard enough stories. Men who swore their wives were imagining things, women who questioned their own sanity. I wasn't going to be one of them, so I sat there, quiet, observing. I imagined what was happening back in that house, the way he would be touching her now. The way he'd be careful not to leave marks, not to get caught. The way he'd probably complain about me, painting himself as the misunderstood husband. I felt another wave of nausea. I started the car again. But instead of going back, I drove to a small park nearby. It was empty, the swings creaking gently in the wind. I parked and stepped out, letting the cold air sting my cheeks. I needed to think. 8 years together, 5 years married. Had it really been falling apart that long, or had he only gotten careless now? I replayed every red flag I'd ignored, the sudden phone privacy, the late nights, the emotional distance, the way he'd snap when I asked simple questions. You're always assuming the worst. Why can't you just trust me? Nothing is going on. I trusted him because I loved him. That was my mistake. Around 10:18 p.m., my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. I stared at it until it stopped ringing. A second later, a text. Hey, everything okay? You didn't answer. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I wrote, I'm out, be home later. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. He replied almost instantly. Okay, drive safe. Drive safe. Like he wasn't destroying me from our living room. I put my phone away and sat on one of the swings. The chains cold against my hands. I rocked back and forth slowly, the motion strangely calming. That's when the anger finally arrived, not loud, not explosive. Focused. Because sadness drains you, but anger fuels you. And suddenly, I had energy. I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't confront him yet. Not tonight, not while she was still there. I wanted him comfortable, confident, sloppy. So instead of going home, I did something I'd never done before. I opened the Look app he'd insisted we both install for safety. He'd framed it as concern, protection, trust. The irony burned. His location sat exactly where I expected. Home. I watched it for a while, waiting for it to move, waiting for proof that she'd leave. At 11:02 p.m., the dot shifted. It stayed in place, but another dot appeared nearby. Her phone. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. So she wasn't just visiting. She was staying. At 11:47 p.m., her dot finally moved, slowly at first, then faster, disappearing down the street. I waited 10 more minutes before I drove back. The house looked normal, quiet, lights off except for the porch. I sat in my car, staring at the front door. This is where he lies to you, I told myself. I took another deep breath and walked inside. He was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter like a man who had nothing to hide. "Hey," he said casually, not even looking up. "You're back late?" I studied his face, the relaxed posture, the calm tone, the ease of deception. "Yeah," I said, hanging my keys. "Traffic?" He nodded. I figured. He leaned in to kiss my cheek. I turned my head slightly, just enough to avoid his lips. He didn't seem to notice or pretended not to. "You eat?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'm tired." That part was true. I walked past him toward the bedroom. The bed was made, but not the way I'd left it. The pillows were shifted. The air smelled different. Perfume. Mine. I felt my hands curl into fists. I changed into pajamas slowly, deliberately, giving myself time to settle into the role I'd just chosen. The woman who didn't know. The woman who trusted. The woman who would soon know everything. When I climbed into bed, he joined me a few minutes later, sliding under the covers like nothing had happened. He reached for me in the dark. I froze. "Not tonight," I said softly. "I've got a headache." He sighed but didn't push. "Okay," he said. "Love you." I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding. He fell asleep quickly. IDN, single quotes T. Because while he dreamed peacefully beside me, I made a silent promise. I would uncover every truth. I would protect myself. And when the time came, he would never see it coming. I woke up before dawn, not because I'd slept well, but because my body refused to rest next to a lie. The room was still dark, the digital clock glowing 5:12 a.m. in soft blue numbers. His breathing was slow and steady beside me, one arm draped across my waist like nothing in the world was wrong. I stared at the ceiling, replaying everything I'd seen and heard the night before. The car, the couch, his voice low and intimate, whispering words that didn't belong to me anymore. I carefully lifted his arm off my body and slid out of bed in the bathroom. I looked at myself under the harsh white light. My eyes were swollen, my face pale, but beneath the exhaustion, something else stared back at me. Awareness. I brushed my teeth, washed my face, and stared at my reflection longer than necessary. This wasn't the woman I'd been yesterday. That version of me trusted blindly, loved freely. This version was alert, strategic. I stepped into the kitchen and made coffee, moving quietly. My hands were steady now. The shock had worn off. What remained was clarity. He came out around 6, rubbing his eyes. "Morning," he said, leaning down to kiss the top of my head. I stiffened but forced myself to relax. "Morning," I replied. He poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone. I watched him over the rim of my mug, noting every movement, every pause, every glance away. "Big day?" I asked casually. He shrugged. "Same as always, a lie smooth and automatic." I nodded, pretending to check my phone. In reality, I was watching his reflection in the microwave door. His jaw tightened briefly when a notification popped up. He turned his phone face down on the counter. New habit. After he left for work, I sat at the kitchen table long after the door closed. The house felt different now, smaller, like it was holding its breath. That was when I started looking. Not snooping, not yet, just observing. The trash can still had last night's bag in it. I pulled it out, my heart pounding harder than I expected. Inside were 2 wine glasses wrapped in paper towels. I only owned one matching pair, and a receipt. I unfolded it slowly. Takeout, Thai food, enough for 2 people. He'd told me he ate at the office. I took a photo and placed everything back exactly how I'd found it then. I sat down and opened my laptop. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, only that I needed to understand how deep this went. I logged into our shared cloud account. We'd set it up years ago to store photos and documents. At first, everything looked normal. Family pictures, vacation albums, old tax files. Then I noticed a folder I didn't recognize. It wasn't labeled with a name, just a date range. My heart raced as I clicked it. Inside were screenshots. Text, conversations. Not with me. With her. Stared at the screen, my breath shallow. The messages weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. "I miss you. Last night was dangerous. We have to be careful." I can't stop thinking about you. The timestamps went back. Months. My hands shook as I scrolled. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. Again and again. I leaned back in my chair, my chest tightening as the weight of it all pressed down on me. Months of lies, months of manipulation, months of me doubting myself while he played both sides. I closed the laptop slowly. I wasn't going to confront him with this, not yet, because something told me there was more, and I was right. That afternoon, I went grocery shopping like it was any other day. I smiled at the cashier, loaded my bags, drove home. But when I pulled into the driveway, something caught my eye. The garage door was slightly open. We always kept it closed. I parked and walked toward it, my heart pounding again. Inside, his car sat where it should, but something else was off. On the passenger seat was a scarf. Not mine. I picked it up carefully. The fabric soft and unfamiliar. It smelled like her perfume, sweet and expensive. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it. Then, I did something that surprised even me. I folded it neatly and placed it back exactly where I'd found it, because I wasn't just discovering the truth anymore. I was building a timeline. That night, he came home late again. Long day, he said, loosening his tie. Sounds like it, I replied. We ate dinner in silence, the kind that used to feel comfortable, but now felt loaded. Every word unspoken carried weight. Later, as he showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The screen lit up with her name. My throat tightened, but my hands stayed still. I took another screenshot with my own phone this time. When he came out of the bathroom, he noticed my expression. You okay? He asked. Just tired, I said. Another lie, this time mine. That night, as he slept, I lay awake again, staring into the dark. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was focused, because now I knew the truth, and he had no idea how much I knew. And soon, that imbalance was going to matter. There's a strange calm that settles in once you stop asking why. I stopped asking why. Somewhere between my third sleepless night and my fourth fake smile across the dinner table, the questions didn't matter anymore. The explanations wouldn't change what he'd done. What mattered now was control, and for the first time in a long time, I had it, because he still thought I was in the dark. That morning, I watched him from the kitchen as he adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man whose biggest concern was whether he'd beat traffic. I might be late again tonight, he said casually, grabbing his keys. I nodded without looking up. Okay. He paused just for a second. That was new. Normally, he would have kissed my cheek and walked out. Instead, he lingered, studying me like he was trying to read something on my face. You've been quiet lately, he said. I shrugged. Just tired. He seemed satisfied with that, or maybe he wanted to be. After the door closed, I exhaled slowly and sat down at the table. Quiet didn't mean weak. Quiet meant observant. I spent the next few days playing my role perfectly. I cooked. I laughed at the right moments. I asked him about his day. I touched his arm when I passed by. And all the while, I watched. He grew sloppier. He started taking phone calls outside, leaving his phone face down more often, smiling at messages he pretended not to read. And then finally he made his mistake. It happened on a Thursday night. He fell asleep on the couch with the TV still on, exhaustion pulling him under before he could pretend anymore. His phone rested loosely in his hand. Unlocked. I stood in the hallway for a full minute, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake him. This was the moment. I stepped closer and gently slid the phone from his fingers. He didn't stir. My hands shook, not with fear, but with adrenaline. I moved into the bathroom and locked the door, sitting on the edge of the tub like I was about to receive life-altering news, because I opened his messages. Her name was right there at the top. I didn't scroll at first. I just stared at it, breathing slowly, grounding myself. Then I tapped. The messages were worse than I imagined. Plans, jokes, complaints about me, thinly veiled, cruel little comments disguised as frustration. She doesn't get me anymore. You're the only one I can really talk to. I hate lying, but I don't know how to stop. My jaw tightened, because I knew exactly how to stop. I scrolled further. Photos. Not explicit, but intimate enough to twist the knife. A picture of her legs stretched across my couch. A blurry mirror selfie taken in my bathroom. Time stamped the night I was out late. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not pain. Resolve. I took screenshots of everything. every message, every image, every timestamp. Then, I checked his email. That's where I found the reservation. A weekend getaway. 2 nights, 1 room, booked for the following month. He hadn't mentioned a trip. He was planning one, with her. I leaned back against the wall, my phone heavy in my hand. My heart raced, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. This wasn't just an affair. This was a life he was building without me, while still standing beside me every morning. Returned his phone exactly as I'd found it and went to bed. Didn't sleep much, but when morning came, I was ready. Over the next week, I became meticulous. I documented everything: dates, times, locations. I turned on my own location history, backed up files to a private drive, changed passwords he didn't know I'd changed. Called a lawyer during my lunch break and sat in my car while she explained my options in a calm, measured voice. "You don't have to decide anything today," she said, "but it's good that you're prepared." Prepared. That word became my anchor. That Friday evening, he came home earlier than usual, flowers in hand. "I thought we could do dinner," he said, smiling like a man playing a role. I accepted the flowers, breathing in their scent. "Sure." At the restaurant, he reached across the table and took my hand. "You know I love you, right?" he said. I met his eyes and smiled softly. "I know." And I did. I knew exactly how much he loved me. Enough to lie, enough to betray, enough to think I'd never find out. When we got home, he went to shower. His phone buzzed on the counter. This time, I picked it up in front of him. He froze in the doorway, towel around his waist. "Who's texting you so late?" I asked lightly. His eyes flicked to the screen. "It's work," he said too quickly. I tilted my head. At 9 p.m., silence stretched between us. I handed him the phone without unlocking it. "Just asking," I said. "You seemed distracted." He nodded, forcing a laugh. "Yeah, sorry." But his confidence was gone, and he knew it. That night, as I lay awake beside him, I realized something important. He was starting to feel it. The shift, the subtle imbalance. He didn't know why, but he knew something had changed. And once fear enters the equation, the truth isn't far behind. There's a difference between knowing the truth and deciding what to do with it. For days, I lived in that space between awareness and action. I moved through our house like a ghost present, functional, but emotionally removed. I cooked meals, answered emails, smiled at the right times, all while planning. Because once you see someone clearly, you stop reacting emotionally, you start thinking strategically. He became restless. I noticed it in the way he checked his phone more often, the way he hesitated before speaking, the way his eyes lingered on me, searching for something: confirmation, maybe, or forgiveness he hadn't asked for. One night, as we folded laundry together, he cleared his throat. "Do you feel distant lately?" he asked. I didn't look up. "Do you?" He laughed awkwardly. "No, I mean maybe a little. Work's been crazy." "Same," I said, folding one of his shirts. The irony almost made me smile. He nodded, relieved, or so he thought. That weekend I suggested something unexpected. "Why don't we host a small dinner?" I said casually. "It's been a while since we had people over." He looked surprised. "Like friends?" "Yeah, maybe a couple coworkers too." I watched his face carefully. There it was. The flicker, the hesitation, he tried and failed to hide. "Sure," he said after a beat. "That could be nice." Nice wasn't the word I would have chosen. Over the next few days, I planned meticulously. I chose the menu, cleaned the house, rearranged the living room, subtly, deliberately. Every detail mattered. I invited a few friends, then I invited his coworkers, including her. When I sent the invitation, my hand hovered over the screen for a moment. I half expected the world to tilt on its axis. "It, DIDN, single quotes, TE. She replied an hour later, "Would love to come." I stared at the message, my chest tight but my hands steady. Of course she would. The night of the dinner arrived quietly. The house glowed with warm light, candles flickering softly. Music played low in the background. Everything looked normal, perfect. He paced a little more than usual, adjusting his shirt, checking his phone. I caught him glancing toward the door more than once. "You okay?" I asked sweetly. "Yeah," he said. "Just hoping everyone shows up." "They will," I said. "Don't worry." When the doorbell rang, my heart skipped, but I opened the door with a smile. Guests trickled in one by one. Laughter filled the room. Wine flowed. The atmosphere relaxed. Then she arrived. She looked confident, effortlessly put together, like someone who believed she had nothing to fear. Her eyes met mine for a split second, and in that moment, something shifted. Recognition, not guilt, curiosity. "Hi," she said brightly. "I'm so glad to finally meet you." Finally, I extended my hand. "I've heard so much about you." Her smile tightened just slightly. He stood frozen behind us for a fraction of a second, long enough for me to notice, but I said nothing. Dinner went smoothly, conversation flowed. She laughed at his jokes. He laughed at hers. They were careful, but familiarity has a way of leaking through, and I watched the way he poured her wine before anyone else, the way she leaned toward him when she spoke, the way their eyes met across the table like they shared a private language. Our friends noticed something too. I could see it in the glances exchanged, the pauses in conversation, the raised eyebrows. After dessert, people moved into the living room. Someone turned on music. Someone else opened another bottle of wine. That's when I made my move. I stood and tapped my glass lightly. "I just wanted to say something," I said. The room quieted. He looked at me, confused. "I'm really grateful for everyone here," I continued, "especially for honesty, transparency, trust." His jaw tightened. I turned to her. "And I'm especially grateful to you," I said calmly, "for keeping him company when I couldn't." The room froze. She blinked. "I what?" He stood abruptly. "What are you doing?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "I thought it might be time to stop pretending," I said, my voice steady. "Don't you?" I opened the cloud folder and mirrored it to the TV messages, photos, dates. Silence slammed into the room like a physical force. Someone gasped. She turned pale. He stared at the screen like it might disappear if he wished hard enough. "Didn't invite everyone here to embarrass anyone," I said. "I invited them because lies thrive in darkness, and I'm done living in it." He tried to speak, but no sound came out. I turned to our guests. "I'm sorry you had to witness this," I said, "but I won't protect a lie anymore." She grabbed her purse. Her face flushed. "This isn't what it looks like," she said weakly. I met her eyes. "It is," I said, "and you know it." She left without another word. He stood there, exposed and shaking, and for the first time since the night I saw her car outside, I felt powerful. The silence after everyone left was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Empty wineglasses sat abandoned on the coffee table. The music still played softly, unaware that everything had changed. The front door clicked shut behind the last guest, and suddenly it was just the two of us, standing in the wreckage of the life he'd dismantled piece by piece. He didn't move at first. Neither did I. Then he ran a hand through his hair and let out a shaky breath. "Why would you do that?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I almost laughed. "Why would I do that?" I repeated calmly. "That's the question you're asking." He paced the room like a trapped animal. "You humiliated me." I turned to face him fully. "You humiliated yourself. I just stopped covering for you." "That wasn't fair," he snapped. "You've blindsided me." I nodded slowly. "Funny. That's exactly how I felt the night I came home early." His face drained of color. You knew," he whispered. "For a while," I said. "Longer than you think." He sank onto the couch, the same couch where everything had started. His shoulder slumped, the confidence completely gone. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," he said weakly. "It just happened." "No," I replied. "You let it happen, over and over again." He looked up at me, eyes glossy. I was lonely. I stared at him, incredulous. "You were married." He rubbed his face. "You've been distant." I felt something cold settle in my chest again, not hurt this time, but disappointment. "I was tired," I said. "Tired from carrying us. Tired from asking you what was wrong and being told nothing." He shook his head. "I never wanted to hurt you." "And yet," I said quietly, "you did." Repeatedly. He stood and stepped toward me, his voice breaking. "Please, we can fix this." I didn't step back. I didn't step forward either. "Fix what?" I asked. "Your lies, your choices, the months you spent building a second life." He opened his mouth but no words came out. "I saw the messages," I continued, "the photos, the reservation for your little getaway." His eyes widened. "You went through my phone." I tilted my head. "That's what you're worried about." He flinched. "I stayed silent while you thought you were winning," I said, "while you thought I was oblivious, while you slept next to me after being with her." His knees buckled slightly, and he leaned against the wall. "I didn't love her," he said desperately. "That doesn't help," I replied. "It actually makes it worse." He stared at me like he was finally seeing me not as his wife, not as someone he could placate, but as a woman who had reached her limit. I called a lawyer, I said. The words landed heavily between us. You what? He asked. I called a lawyer, I repeated. I know my options. I know where I stand. His voice dropped to a whisper. You're leaving me. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked past him and picked up one of the empty glasses, turning it slowly in my hands. I'm choosing myself, I said finally. For the first time in a long time, he followed me into the kitchen. Please don't do this. We can go to counseling. I'll cut contact. I swear. I believe you'd try, I said. I just don't believe you'd stop. That hurt him more than yelling ever could. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I never thought you'd actually leave, he admitted. That was the truth, and that was the problem. I spent that night in the guest room, not because I was afraid, but because I needed space to breathe, to feel the reality of what I was about to do. In the early hours of the morning, my phone buzzed. A message from her. I didn't know he was going to do this. I didn't mean to hurt you. I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, You didn't respect me. That's different. She didn't respond. The next day, I packed a bag. He watched silently as I folded clothes and placed them inside. Every movement felt final. You don't have to go, he said softly. I do, I replied. If I stay, I'll start doubting myself again. He nodded slowly, like he finally understood. As I zipped the bag shut, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the waiting was over. I walked toward the door and paused. This didn't destroy me, I said without turning around. It revealed you. Then I left. The first night alone felt unreal. I checked into a small extended stay hotel just outside the city. Nothing fancy. Just clean and quiet, the kind of place people stayed when life pressed pause and forced them to figure things out. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my packed bag like it might start speaking to me. This was it. No familiar walls, no shared routines, no pretending. I expected to cry myself to sleep. Instead, I slept like someone who hadn't rested in months. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, and for a brief moment, I forgot where I was. Then, everything came rushing back. The car, the couch, the whispers. I sat up and waited for the pain to hit it. DIDN, single quotes, T not yet. What I felt instead was something quieter. Relief. I made coffee using the tiny machine in the kitchenette, and sat by the window, watching strangers move through their lives. Everyone had somewhere to go, somewhere to be. For the first time in years, so did I. My phone buzzed constantly. That first day. Missed calls, voicemails, texts. All from him. I didn't answer. I wasn't punishing him. I was protecting myself. Later that afternoon, my best friend came by. She took one look at me and pulled me into a hug so tight I finally broke. I cried then, not because I missed him, but because I missed the woman I'd been before. I shrank myself to keep our marriage together. You did the right thing, she said firmly. I nodded. I knew she was right. Knowing didn't make it easy. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. Work, lawyer, meetings, paperwork. I learned words I never wanted to learn. Assets, accounts, separation terms. Every signature felt like closing a chapter. He kept reaching out. Emails. This time, I'll do anything. I made a mistake. Please don't throw us away. I didn't reply, because I wasn't throwing anything away. I was finally putting something down that had been too heavy to carry alone. A week later, I heard through mutual friends that she had stopped showing up to work functions, that she'd transferred departments, that people were whispering. Consequences have a way of rippling outward. Then came the call I hadn't expected. His mother. I almost didn't answer. Almost. I didn't raise him to do this, she said through tears. I'm so sorry. Her apology mattered more than I thought it would. I know, I said gently, but I can't fix what he broke. She understood. Not everyone did. Some people asked if I was overreacting, if I should give him another chance, if marriage wasn't about forgiveness. I smiled politely and changed the subject. Forgiveness doesn't require proximity. One evening, I ran into him, unexpectedly, at a grocery store of all places. He looked different. Smaller. Tired. He froze when he saw me. Hey, he said quietly. Hey. We stood there awkwardly between the produce and the frozen foods. I miss you, he said. I know, I replied. Do you miss me? I thought about it. I miss who I thought you were. I said honestly. Not who you showed me. That hurt him. I could tell, but I wasn't cruel about it. I just wasn't lying anymore. He nodded slowly. I lost everything. I met his eyes. No, you gave it away. I walked past him without another word. Back at the hotel that night, I looked around the small space that had become my temporary home. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I opened my laptop and started browsing apartments, places with big windows and light-colored walls, places that didn't hold memories that would stab me when I least expected it. That's when I realized something important. I wasn't just surviving, I was rebuilding, and while he was stuck trying to recover what he'd lost, I was moving forward. I thought the hardest part was behind me. That once I left, once I chose myself, the rest would be a slow, steady climb back to normal, healing, distance. Closure was wrong, because closure doesn't come when you walk away. It comes when the truth finally stops changing. I had just signed a lease on a small apartment across town, bright, open, quiet, the kind of place that smelled like fresh paint and second chances. I stood in the empty living room, keys in hand, letting myself imagine a future that belonged only to me. That's when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Almost. Double quotes. Hello. There was a pause on the other end. Then, a woman's voice, hesitant, shaky. I don't know if you'll remember me, she said, but we met once, years ago, at your house. My heart skipped. It was her. I didn't speak right away. I'm not calling to cause problems, she continued quickly. I need you to know something. I leaned against the wall, my chest tight. What is it? Another pause. He lied to both of us, she said. From the beginning. I closed my eyes. I already know that, I replied. No, she said softly. I mean more than you think. She told me everything. How he'd told her we were already separated. How he'd said I knew about her. That we were just figuring out logistics. I felt something crack, not in my heart, but in my understanding. He said you didn't care anymore, she said. That you'd emotionally checked out. I laughed bitterly. That's convenient. I didn't find out the truth until your dinner, she said. That was the first time I realized how much he'd lied. I listened as she spoke about the promises he'd made her, about the future he'd hinted at, about the way he'd framed himself as a man stuck in a loveless marriage. He was good, she admitted, too good. When the call ended, I sat down on the bare floor of my new apartment, because suddenly, the story shifted. This wasn't just betrayal, it was manipulation. He hadn't just cheated, he'd rewritten reality for everyone involved. That night, I reread the messages I'd saved, this time through a different lens. The careful phrasing, the omissions, the half-truths. He hadn't been reckless, he'd been calculated, and that realization did something unexpected. It freed me, because now I knew none of this was about my worth, or my effort, or my failure as a wife. It was about his need to feel admired, desired, in control. I wasn't special to him. Neither was she. We were interchangeable. That's when the anger finally disappeared. Not because I forgave him, but because I understood him. That an understanding took away his power. A few days later, I met with my lawyer again. We finalized details, drew clear boundaries. He's asking for reconciliation, she said. But legally, you're in a strong position. I'm not interested in reconciliation, I replied. I'm interested in closure. She smiled. Then you're already winning. Later that week I returned to the house one last time, with him not there to collect the rest of my things. Walking through those rooms felt different now, less painful, more distant. I packed quickly. Then I noticed something on his desk, a handwritten note. It was addressed to her, an old one and sent. Never felt this understood before. I folded it carefully and placed it back where I'd found it, because he'd probably written the same words to me once. I locked the door behind me and left the key on the counter. As I drove away, I felt lighter, not because the story was over, but because it finally made sense. Time has a way of doing what confrontation never can. It doesn't argue, it doesn't explain, it just reveals. 3 months passed, not quietly but steadily. My new apartment slowly became home. I bought furniture piece by piece, choosing things I loved without compromise. Light-colored curtains, a deep blue couch, plants that thrived in sunlight. Every choice felt intentional. Every choice felt like reclaiming myself. I stopped checking his social media, stopped wondering what he was doing, stopped imagining whether he missed me. Because the truth is, I didn't need to imagine. The consequences started finding him on their own. It began with work. One afternoon, a mutual acquaintance called me not to gossip, but to warn me. He's not doing well, she said carefully. He was removed from a major project. HR's involved. I didn't ask questions. I already knew why. Workplace affairs don't stay private forever. They leak through tone, tension, favoritism. People notice patterns long before they understand them. He'd been confident he could separate his lies. He was wrong. Then came the house. He couldn't afford it on his own. The place we once called ours, the couch, the kitchen, the backyard we never finished landscaping was listed quietly. No announcement, no celebration. Just another silent loss. One evening, as I was unpacking groceries, my phone buzzed. A text from him. I get it now. I stared at the screen. Did he? Another message followed. I thought I could replace what we had. I can't. I didn't respond. Because realization doesn't require acknowledgement. It requires acceptance. A week later, he showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I didn't open the door right away. I watched him through the peephole, standing there with slumped shoulders, holding something in his hands. Flowers. Again. Some habits die hard. I opened the door, just enough to speak. You shouldn't be here, I said calmly. I know, he replied. I just needed to see you. I crossed my arms. Why? He swallowed. Because everything fell apart. I studied his face. He looked older, worn down, like someone who'd run out of excuses and finally had to sit with the truth. She left, he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. I thought you said she understood you. He winced. She didn't like being lied to. He admitted that. The irony almost made me laugh. I lost my job, he continued. Not officially, but I'm done there. People know. I said nothing. I thought I could rebuild, he said. But nothing sticks. Everything reminds me of you. I finally spoke. That's because I was real, I said. Not a fantasy you could rewrite. His eyes filled with tears. I would do anything to go back, he whispered. I shook my head gently. There is no back. He stood there for a long moment, then held out what he'd been clutching. A small box. I found this while packing, he said. It's yours. I hesitated, then took it. Inside was my grandmother's ring, the one I thought I'd lost years ago. I closed the box. Thank you, I said. He nodded, like he knew that was all he was getting. As he turned to leave, he paused. You won, he said softly. I looked at him, really looked at him. This was never about winning, I replied. It was about waking up. After he left, I sat on my couch and opened the box again, sliding the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, not because he'd returned it, but because I'd finally come back to myself. That night, I slept deeply. Not from exhaustion, from peace. Because the man who once thought he could keep two lives separate, now had none that fit. And I was no longer part of the wreckage. Morning sunlight streamed through the new apartment's windows, warm and forgiving. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee, savoring the calm. For the first time in months, I wasn't replaying the past. I wasn't wondering what he was doing or who he was with. I wasn't waiting for a knock on the door, a message, or a call. I was simply present. Reclaiming my life didn't happen overnight. It was a slow process, piece by piece, like assembling a puzzle with every shard of confidence I'd thought I'd lost. I started with small things: plants on the windowsill, a painting I'd always admired, a cozy blanket I actually liked. Then bigger things, new routines, new friends, a renewed sense of independence I hadn't felt since my early 20s. Work became a sanctuary. My colleagues noticed a new energy in me: calm, assertive, unshakable. They didn't need the details, and I didn't offer them. My life had become mine again, and I was fiercely protective of that. No one, not him, not anyone else, could take it from me. Weeks passed, and the notifications on my phone began to slow. He had stopped reaching out, perhaps realizing the bridge had burned entirely, or maybe recognizing that whatever power he thought he held over me was gone. News traveled indirectly. Mutual acquaintances shared that he was struggling, financially, socially, emotionally. I didn't feel satisfaction or glee. I simply observed quietly, knowing that life had a way of balancing itself out. Then one evening, I walked past a small coffee shop downtown. There, through the window, I caught a glimpse of him sitting alone, hunched over a notebook, pen in hand. He didn't notice me. He looked tired, weary, the confidence he had once carried now replaced by a quiet resignation. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of empathy, just a fraction, but I didn't turn back. My path was forward, not backward. Life after betrayal is about understanding that the world doesn't end when trust is broken. It's about discovering your strength when someone else proves incapable of integrity. Every decision I made now, every choice was anchored in that knowledge. I no longer feared the unknown because I had survived the worst kind of certainty. Knowing the person you trusted most chose another. A few months later, I hosted a small gathering of friends in my new place. Laughter filled the rooms, just like the dinners we used to host, but now there was no tension, no underlying fear, no hidden truths. I realized the difference between my old life and my new one. I was surrounded by people who uplifted me, who valued honesty, who celebrated my presence. No one here had secrets. No one manipulated the story to serve themselves. And then it happened. One of my friends raised a toast. 2 new beginnings, she said, to choosing ourselves, even when it's hard. I raised my glass, feeling the warmth of their support, and in that moment, the weight of everything I had endured, the lies, the betrayal, the heartbreak fell away. It didn't disappear completely. It never would. But it had transformed from pain into power. I thought about him once, briefly, not with longing but with clarity. He had made choices that had consequences. I had made choices that built a life. The difference was evident, undeniable. Later that night, I walked onto my balcony, looking out over the city lights. The skyline stretched endlessly, each illuminated window representing stories, some happy, some tragic, some ordinary. I smiled. I was part of one of those stories. Now, my own story. And it was mine alone. And I knew this for certain. I didn't just survive betrayal. I didn't just expose the truth. I reclaimed my life, my peace, and my identity. The ring on my finger caught the moonlight, the one he returned, once a symbol of love betrayed, now a reminder of resilience, strength, and self-respect. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything to him. It was about me, about the woman who finally stood tall after years of compromise. As I turned back inside, the apartment warm and filled with life, I realized something fundamental. The end of one chapter isn't a loss, it's a chance to start writing the next, with clarity, courage, and uncompromising honesty. And for the first time in a very long time, I was excited about every word yet to come.